Hey, did you know that plastic wrap is great at saving your sandwich, but it is terrible at protecting the planet? See, plastic wrap contributes to the overall plastic pollution crisis. So instead of reaching for that cling food wrap the next time you need to save your leftovers, why don't you put them in reusable containers or even beeswax food wrap? Wait, what? Hey, did you say beeswax? Well, yes, I did. And you can make it yourself. It's pretty easy. Come on, let's create, and I'll show you how. Hi folks, I'm Stacey, the Teen Services Library Assistant at the Goffstown Public Library, and you are tuning in to another episode of Let's Create Teen DIY. So in this episode, I'm going to show you how to make your own beeswax food wrap. It's really easy, and it's better for the planet. So before we get started, let me tell you what you need. First, you will want a washed 100% cotton piece of fabric that's not too thick. You'll see I have these edges on mine here. I used pinking shears to cut my fabric to just seal the edges, but really you can just use any type of scissors because once you put the melted beeswax on there, it will seal your edges anyway. The other thing is you can use varied sizes. 10 by 10 is a great size to wrap up a sandwich though. Next, you'll need a piece of parchment paper, an inexpensive paintbrush kept solely for this purpose, 100% organic beeswax pellets. The amount will depend on the size of your fabric. See the description field for some guidance. And finally, you'll want to have a baking sheet to put the parchment paper and the fabric on for when you put it in the oven. And then you'll want some tongs to remove that fabric after it has baked for a little bit, and then some place to cool it. A cookie drying rack or even a clothing rack that's not wooden would work for that purpose. Okay, so that's everything you need. Now let's get on to step 1. So to get started with making our beeswax food wrap, I went ahead and preheated my oven to 225 degrees Fahrenheit. And then I've set a cookie baking sheet on my counter. I'm going to place a piece of parchment paper onto my baking sheet. And then working with a piece of fabric, the piece of fabric I have today is about 10 inches by 10 inches. I'm going to place that printed side down onto the parchment paper. You will notice that the parchment paper extends beyond the fabric, and you want to make sure that your parchment paper does that. Later on, we'll be brushing some of that melted beeswax, and you want to be able to brush all the way to the edges, but you don't want to get it on your baking sheet. So if you have to, you could add another piece of parchment paper underneath to make sure that it goes and extends beyond your fabric, depending on the size of fabric you use. Now that we have that set up, all we have to do is sprinkle on some of our beeswax. So I have about 2 teaspoons of beeswax pellets here, and so I'm just going to sprinkle those evenly, as evenly as possible, over the fabric. If any pieces get onto your parchment paper, just pick them up and put them right onto your fabric piece. Okay. Now it's ready to put into the oven. So place your baking sheet into your preheated oven and let the beeswax melt for about 5 to 10 minutes. Okay, so it has been about 5 minutes. You can see that my beeswax has melted. So I'm going to take a paintbrush and I'm going to just make sure that every piece of my fabric is coated with beeswax. If you have any place on your fabric that looks dry, that's what this is for. Make sure you bring it all the way to the edges. That looks pretty good. Set it back in for 1 minute more. if you find that there are some dry spots on your fabric and maybe you need a little bit more beeswax, you can always go ahead and add a few more pellets now and simply put it back in the oven for a few more minutes. It's easier to add beeswax than to put too much beeswax on and try to get it off. I've removed my baking sheet from the oven and I'm going to use a pair of tongs to just kind of lift my fabric and cool it for a minute. And using a cookie cooling rack or even a clothes drying rack, you're going to place your beeswax covered fabric down to cool. It shouldn't take too long. Are you wondering how to clean your beeswax food wrap? It's really simple. Just take some cool water, rinse, and then let it dry. It's that simple. So, what can you use your beeswax food wrap for? Well, you can wrap a sandwich. You could cover a bowl. You can travel with some fruit. And really, all you have to do to get it to stick is warm the beeswax up with your fingers a little bit. It will stick to the bowls that you're covering and even to itself. I hope you enjoyed learning how to make your own beeswax wrap. If you enjoyed this video, please like it below and make sure you share it with your friends. And if you are looking for more ways to craft, check out Creative Bug. It's an online resource full of videos, instructions, and crafting workshops. And with your Goffstown Public Library card, you have unlimited access. Finally, make sure you subscribe to Goffstown Public Library's YouTube channel so you never miss another great video. That's all for today. Hey, I'll see you next time on Let's Create Teen DIY. Bye!